Alright, in this video we'll be looking at 8.7 Disruptions to Ecosystems, Unit 8 Ecology. This is actually the final portion of Unit 8 and thus the final portion of AP Biology. And so, yeah, that's kind of fun. So we'll be looking at disruptions in this particular video and how ecosystems adapt to those disruptions. Those disruptions can be man-made or they can be natural. We talked about evolution in a whole unit, and we talked about how adaptation and genetic variation is going to be favored by natural selection, and how anytime that's going to happen, you're going to have the overall ecosystem and the species in that ecosystem are going to be benefited from that. This video shows something called succession, where an ecosystem kind of changes over time. And the important thing I wanted to note here is this all started with a fire, right? And so what's going to survive the fire? Well, those things that are best adapted for that, they're going to survive and grow. And so if as this happens, as this ecosystem continually turns over, what you'd expect to see is the things that are better adapted for that change are going to survive. Now we're going to look at some disruptions to ecosystems. Here's a picture of some trees that the reason I put them on here is because it shows you there's a disruption to the ecosystem, right? Snow. And how are these trees particularly adapted for that? They're able to hold that snow, and then once the snow gets too heavy, it just kind of bends the branches and it falls on the ground, as opposed to breaking the tree. Now, there are examples of these trees breaking, of course, but in general, they're able to adapt to that disruption. One example of a disruption that is bad for ecosystems is something called an invasive species. An invasive species is a species that is not native to a specific area and can actually harm the community that it enters into. Their presence in that community can be intentional or it can be unintentional. It can be meaning it could have been brought in on purpose, or it could have been brought in accidentally, or it could have been brought in on purpose without the intent of it becoming invasive. Um, and so there's basically what the invasive species does is that since it's not part of the community and hasn't adapted to the environmental changes with that community, it is able to exploit new resources without having the fear of predation or other selection pressures being acted upon it. And so it's able to outcompete for those resources, and it's able to do so unchecked, essentially growing exponentially in the process. A great example of an invasive species in our own continent and really the world over are domestic cats. Domestic cats do not occur naturally in the wild because they're not a species that would have been able to make it in the wild, but because of the coming on of feral cats, which a feral cat is basically an unsocialized domestic cat, um, they're very good at exploiting resources in an area that are used to being around humans, like small birds and reptiles and rodents. Really suffer from domestic cat species, and probably first brought into the United States in the 17th century, and are thought to be the cause of the extinction of hundreds of birds and small rodents and reptiles over the course of those several hundred years, and are causing extinction worldwide. In our own country, cats are like adored and people buy like things for them, but in other countries people hunt cats and there's an open season on cats. I know it seems strange, but it's for this reason that many of the native species are being destroyed, and it's literally destroying whole ecosystems. And so this is just one example of that. This is the example of the stink bug that you've probably all seen in your houses now, because it's an invasive species. It came from a different place, but it does really well here because there's nothing to eat it and there's nothing to kill it. And so that could change, but it could take hundreds of years to change. That's just how that works. And so, looking at the distribution of ecosystems across the world, this is the current distribution of ecosystems, and you can kind of see there. This is kind of a very uh, vague look at ecosystems, a very broad look at them, but that's fine. This actually can change because of human involvement. And here's an example of that, this picture. You can see there, looking at those two pictures, how even just something as simple as agriculture has completely changed um, the way the world looks. Something that used to be forests are now giant fields to produce food for people. And so this is going to cause a lot of problems. Urbanization, this causes loss of species diversity, deforestation, erosion, extinction. All of these things are human caused events. New diseases can wreck native species. Human migration, overpopulation can accelerate the spread of disease. And so all of these are things that have been caused by humans, which kind of leads us to this idea of disturbance ecology. Disturbance ecology studies the effect of these disturbances. Now, not all disturbances are man-made. You know, a fire can happen in a forest pretty regularly. In fact, some ecosystems depend on fire for reproduction. It happens because of lightning or other causes. Um, or a beaver, I think I have a picture. Yeah, a beaver can build a dam in a forest and completely change the forest. And it's a very natural thing for that beaver to be there and to do that, but it changes the whole landscape, literally floods the forest. And so those species have to adapt to the disruption to their ecosystems or they'll die. And so this sort of disturbance actually, though it causes short term loss probably for the ecosystem, it can lead to overall long term gains for the ecosystem because of causing adaptability, which can change, which causes increased fitness, increased reproductive success, and overall health of the ecosystem.